Let's bring in Aaron Blake. He's a senior political reporter for The Washington Post, and he joins us now from D.C. Hi, Aaron.
Good morning.
So let us start by quoting something that you wrote this morning. You write in your piece this morning, the information isn't just troubling because it suggests the Trump campaign sought out the help of Russians to win the presidency. It also contradicts a number of claims made by the White House, the campaign, and Trump Jr. himself, claims made as recently as this weekend. Certainly, Trump Jr.'s explanation has been evolving. What did you mean when you wrote that?
Well, this has obviously been a story for about a year now that this investigation has been public. It was a little bit more than a year ago that the WikiLeaks dump initially took place of the DNC emails. Ever since then, there have been a number of instances where we've asked the White House, asked spokespeople for the campaign, what they knew about potential contacts with Russians. A lot of times these answers were a little bit varied, but many of them were actually pretty broad. They said that there was no contact with foreign entities. They said that there was no contact during the campaign. A lot of those statements have come into question now, especially, I would argue, with the news on Sunday of Donald Trump Jr. taking that meeting. The White House doesn't seem to have done a whole lot of homework about what its people were up to during the campaign, and that's the most charitable explanation. So I think it just really adds to the questions about exactly what was going on here, the fact that the White House kept denying that these kinds of contacts took place, and we keep finding out that, in fact, they did take place.
Yeah, and I guess the key question is why they would deny it in the first place. As Anne-Marie said, Trump Jr.'s position sort of evolved over 48 hours, and he took issue with your premise on Twitter this morning that you just laid out, tweeting no inconsistency in statements. Meeting ended up being primarily about adoptions. In response to further questions, I simply provided more details. Does that satisfy you?
I think this is a really good example of kind of why this story has become what it's become over the course of the last several months here. The initial explanation that he gave was this was all about adoptions. That was the primary subject that was discussed. It wasn't until the reporters found out that the pretext for the meeting was opposition research that he acknowledged that that was the case. The question from there is, why didn't they disclose that initially? Why was this meeting not disclosed a long time ago? It just makes it look like they don't have their ducks in order or they have something to hide. And that's been a kind of a common thread throughout all these different revelations about contacts with Russians throughout the last, year here.
Yeah, there's always a lot of talk about, the ongoing investigations and that have been going on for a year now and why they're dragging on. But if people were just upfront about the meetings that they had from the get-go, and instead of waiting until, say, a journalist reveals that, maybe things would have evolved a little faster. Aaron, when you look at the current Trump-Russia relationship, what are the implications of the conflicting narratives that we are hearing about the president's discussion with Putin at the G20 summit? Now, the Russians are suggesting that Trump accepted Putin's denial about the election meddling, but his own surrogates over the weekend, Reince Priebus, I believe, said, no, the president doesn't believe Putin at all when he said that he wasn't meddling.
Yeah, I think if you look really closely at what they were saying, they're actually not disagreeing with the idea that he accepted Putin's denials. Reince Priebus was asked about whether he accepted them, and he said, well, the president believes that Russia did in fact hack. He doesn't believe what Putin is saying. Well, that may very well be the case. The real question we're asking here, though, is did he press Putin on this? Is this going to affect their relationship going forward? The fact that Putin is denying something that the U.S. government intelligence agencies say is a fact. Whether the president believes that or not is kind of immaterial. The real question is whether he actually pressed Putin on this and whether that's something that could be used in negotiations about potential partnerships going forward. Because that seems to be a really rather large sticking point in this whole relationship.
Yeah, and then, of course, the question is what punitive measures might the U.S. government take? Which leads to really this next question. After intense criticism over the weekend from both sides of the aisle, the president appears to be backtracking on that idea of having a joint cyber task force with Russia. He had spoken to Putin about that at the G20 meeting. What can we read into that backtracking?
Well, it was a strange proposal from the very beginning. It was originally sent out in a tweet by the president and reported. This was roundly denounced, including by many Republican senators. Senator Ben Sasse, a frequent Trump critic, a Republican from Nebraska, tweeted out that this was a really bad idea last night. And then we saw the president backtrack on it and say that it's not actually something they're going to pursue. So it just seems odd that this was something that was floated in the first place if this wasn't something that they were actually going to pursue. Also an odd decision to potentially, to talk about even doing something with somebody who you still have vehement disagreements with about Russian hacking in the 2016 election.
Yeah, it raises the question whether he's improvising to some degree in these really important meetings with world leaders.
Well, I wondered, to myself, we know very little about what happened in that meeting, and to choose to tweet out that of all things. Clearly the president, it appeared at least, initially was proud of being able to hammer out an agreement like that.
It probably sounded like a really good idea at the time, the fact that he wants the two countries to work together. He wants a good relationship with Russia, so why don't we work together on this issue that's dividing us right now? The problem that maybe he didn't perceive at the time was it's hard to work with somebody you don't trust on the very same issue you're talking about working with them on. So I think it maybe is a good example of him maybe not quite getting the perception issue of this whole thing, including among Republicans in Congress.
Yeah, Aaron Blake of the Washington Post. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you.